May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. So the stage is set perfectly. It's a hot, sunny day in the Middle East, and we have a group of fishermen out on their boats. The sun is beating hot down upon them. They are sweaty, they are salty, they are muddy, and time again they are casting their nets into the sea, hoping for that big haul that's going to let them go home early and shower up and enjoy the fruits of their labors. And yet inevitably they cast the net in and they pull it out and they get some seaweed and some garbage and some small fish. They throw it in again and maybe they get a few more, but now the nets are ripped and they need to spend their precious time mending their nets. It's a hard job being a fisherman, I can imagine. I've never been much of a fisherman by hobby, let alone by trade. But this wasn't a sport for Simon Peter and Andrew or James and John or their father Zebedee. This was their livelihood. This was how they supported themselves in the world. And so they're out there worried about whether or not they're going to catch enough fish to sell at the market, to make ends meet. And on top of all of that, there's something else weighing on their minds. The gospel this morning begins framing this whole story with the news that John the Baptist has been arrested, thrown in prison. We know from the Gospel of John that at least Andrew, among the first disciples, was a disciple of John the Baptist before he became a disciple of Jesus. So we know at least for Andrew, this is devastating news. For Jesus himself, this is devastating news that John the Baptist has been thrown in prison. And they could only imagine or expect what was to become poor old John. He had spoken ill of the wrong people, he had called out the wrong people in authority, and he was going to suffer dearly for it. So it would feel for some of these soon-to-be disciples of Jesus that the good guys were losing. That someone they had all looked up to as a prophet of hope and of change had befallen the hands of a corrupt system. Then enter Jesus. Taking a stroll along the side of the lake, he sees this ragtag group of fishermen, this ragtag group of nobodies, easily overlooked. But he stops and he calls out to them. He says, "Follow me." And they do. That's pretty remarkable. They drop their nets in the middle of the workday and quit their jobs. How many of you would do that? The financial uncertainty that comes with a decision like that, it's crazy. It's crazy. And Jesus didn't have to use any persuasive arguments. He just walks right up and says, "Follow me." And they follow him. Why? What is it about this Jesus that has such a magnetic effect that it causes people to do crazy things? It's almost as if Jesus pulled a Jedi mind trick on these people, right? At least that's how I imagine it when I'm reading the gospel. He just walks up and says, "Follow me." But I don't think Jesus was a Jedi. I think there's something more going on here. So in order to understand, you need to have a little context on what rabbis were like in Jesus' day. Rabbis, obviously, were the teaching authority of the Jewish religion. And if you wanted to be a disciple of the rabbi, there was a set of protocols you had to follow. First, you had to start following the rabbi literally. You would walk behind them in the streets until they deigned to take notice of you. Then they would examine you. They'd ask you questions about the Torah. How much do you know? How much have you studied? Are you ready? Are you worthy to be my disciple? And if the rabbi deemed you worthy, then you could follow him. There was a saying among the rabbis, or among the disciples of the rabbis, that may I walk so closely behind my rabbi that the dust from his sandals is always upon me. It's a very powerful statement of humility and reverence toward these people who were rabbis. Now notice the way Jesus does it entirely backwards, entirely upside down. He doesn't wait for anyone to come to him. He doesn't give anyone a religious test. He doesn't put anybody through a trial before he decides you are worthy to be my follower. No, he goes to you. He comes right to Peter and Andrew and James and John, and he calls them exactly the opposite of the way it's supposed to go. And maybe it was this surprising gift of grace, this surprising privilege that comes out of nowhere when Jesus comes and says, "Follow me," that was just so darn radical that these people dropped their nets and just leapt at the privilege of being called by the newest, latest, upcoming rabbi in Galilee. You see, that's the way God's grace works. It doesn't wait for you to come to God. It does not wait for you to be ready for God's grace. It does not ask you any questions or give you any tests or require you to follow any protocols. It comes in a surprising, radical way that just breaks into your life. And it just might make you drop your nets, drop everything to follow him. Another thing that's remarkable about Jesus' calling of the first disciples is the statement of becoming fishers of people, fishers of men, in the more gender-appropriate terms, fishers of people. Why on earth would Jesus use this metaphor? After all, being a fisherman was not the highly esteemed trade. It was dirty. It was not glamorous. It was surprising to the fishermen that Jesus would take their trade as a metaphor for holy things. It was an honor. I will make you fishers of people. Now, I think we need to be careful with this metaphor, right? Because we're all called to be fishers of people in this sense. But, I mean, unless we're fishermen, this metaphor is a little foreign to us. The net is a dangerous thing for the fish, right? It ensnares them, it tricks them, it kills them. It is actually a rather parasitic activity that human beings engage in when they fish. A necessary one, because we all need to eat, but not good news for the fish. We need to remember that the net we cast on the world is good news, even though it might be confusing or strange at first to be caught up or ensnared in God's love. It is indeed good news and not bad news like it is for the fish. And I was thinking, what other metaphors could we use aside from fishing nets? And one came to me the other morning when I was hanging out with some of your Friday ladies, watching them sew their quilts, for the folks who are in nursing homes and other places. And I thought, what a beautiful, metaphor that could be. Very similar to a net in that it surrounds you, but instead of surrounding you for your ensnarement or your killing, it is there for comfort and warmth and a sign of friendship and a sign of love. We are quilt makers as Christians, extending the blanket of God's love over the arms and shoulders of people who are cold and in need of a good word. And I've seen the way this church has done it. I haven't been hanging out with you too long, but I've seen all the ways in which you show this love, this net of God's love, and wrap it around people. I see it in your spaghetti dinners. I see it in the ministries you do here for people of all backgrounds and positions in life. You're already doing it. You're already fishers of people. That's good news, right? This story is wonderful because it tells you that no matter what your position is in life, whether you're wealthy or poor, whether you have a hard job as a blue-collar worker or a white-collar, or have no job at all, God can use you. God can call you. God has a job for you. Whether you are a child or whether you have gray hair, as long as you draw breath, you can share God's love, right? And God will help you. Because that net of God's love surrounds all of you, and not one of you can ever fall out of it. Thanks be to God.
Amen.